Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows or their adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series finale, of Sandman. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. As I said, I question mark the series finale because, it is the end of the show, but there obviously is a bonus episode that's coming out in a couple of days at the time I'm recording this. So, depending on the contents of it, because it's treated as more like a bonus episode, so I think this is technically the final episode. But if I feel the need to, I can always title this the series finale for now, and then change my mind later on to just make it season 2 episode 11. That's just a me thing to worry about. But just in general, a very solemn episode because it is Morpheus's funeral, and that ends up being kind of the point. Anytime you're referencing dream, it's everyone's we're talking about our dream, the one we've come to know, versus Jacob Anderson's dream, his dream, and the one that is gone is Morpheus. And our trio of Lucien, Matthew, and Nola are kind of struggling with that because it's he's not their dream, even if he is the Lord of Dreams now. It's how do they kind of contend with that? Then we have Kane upset because he's cool, I had a contract with the Lord of Dreams that there has to always be another. And obviously he was kind of a little threatening, and then Dream is yo, don't do that. Even if you whether you mean to follow through on those threats or whether you're just speaking, do not do that. And so he asks him, it's please bring my brother back. It's all right, describe him to me. And then brings Abel back. I think it's such a neat thing. I didn't even think about this last episode. I didn't even think about it at all once Dream had given him the pendant and the necklace, because Dream had a ruby, and Morpheus had a ruby. This Dream has essentially an emerald, and he's going around doing a lot. He brings back Abel. It's wait, you were able to do that? He's yes. Because even Lucien's kind of surprised, because she's trying to understand how much of him is actually the Dream that she knew versus Daniel. But even he's kind of abandoned the name Daniel because it's Daniel burned away and all that remains is Dream. And he's struggling with everything, especially when Lucien's I'm probably going to leave, because she was I was here for Morpheus, and now that he's gone, maybe I go out there and see what's out there. And it's kind of he doesn't want to keep her from that, but he's stuck between. He is essentially a newborn. He's scared because he's I don't know what to do. And you were Morpheus's advisor, and right hand. So for you to leave me and to stay, and because there's also and the Corinthian makes the comparison that he's pretty much in the same state as the Corinthian. The Corinthian has some memories of the first Corinthian that he carries over into the second version. And the same thing in this case. Dream has elements of Morpheus in some of his memories, and so he's stuck with being Morpheus side of him wants to know, I want to keep you close because you've always been by my side, but also I don't want to kind of keep you held, but it's also it'll be lonely without you because I'm lost, not knowing what to do. I don't know who I am as I'm struggling to figure this out. Obviously, a whole bunch of guests arrive for the funeral. We got Joanna showing up. We got Hobb showing up. We got Rose showing up, which was quite the interesting meeting with the Corinthian. And him being we had some good times, didn't we? And just pulling down his shades and his teeth eyes clicking. I'm yeah. I get it. You're playing the role of the nightmare, so you kind of have to lean into the villainy of it. But still, come on, did you think she was really going to be okay with that? I also thought it was interesting because I was oh, Lyta's not showing up as well. It's well, she would have reason to show up because her son is now the King of Dreams. But also it's well, you played a part in what became of the previous King of Dreams, so it's probably not the most welcoming of circumstances. So we had Arthur Duvall's character. If I remember correctly, he was from the bonus episode, part of the bonus episode, the Calliope episode, if I remember correctly. Once again, I'd had to go back because I was I didn't fully remember what that storyline went, because I was pretty sure Calliope was just out and about, which even she shows up at the funeral, so does Nada, because it doesn't erase the fact is this was as complicated as things are, and you have a little bit of time away. It probably eases some wounds. It won't heal all of them, but it eases some. And you're just this was someone I loved at a point in time. I do want to say goodbye, because it just never really occurred to any of them that right, he would be gone. And so that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And I love that, the siblings have gathered. Death isn't wearing red. Oh, she's wearing red, and it's like, because even Matthew's like, don't you normally wear black? And she's like, yeah, but not today. Because it's just like, I think it's almost like because black goes in line with death. I think there's also, and she doesn't talk about it too much, and I'm wondering how much of a conversation she had with her siblings about those final moments she had with Dream. But I think she talks about that a little bit in her farewell to him. But there's even a conversation about like, right, Desire, you wanted to, have him spill family blood, and he did. So you got what you want. Are you happy? And Desire's like, you think I would be, but I'm not. Because regardless of how much they butted heads, you still lost a brother, and it still cuts you to your core, and it hurts. And I thought it was so beautiful. Oh, I'm jumping around a lot, but like everyone's speeches, even Desire's being like, yeah, we butted heads and stuff like that, but my brother is gone, and I'm going to miss basically infuriating him. And just like, those speeches were getting me severely teary-eyed. The one that almost completely broke me was Lucien's, but breaking them all down, we had Despair's, which was so interesting because she had talked about it previously. Like, she didn't really know her brother that well. That's why she wanted, like, she was saying like it was up to Matthew and Lucien to speak because it was Destiny that suggested Lucien to speak, because it's like, you stood by his side, you knew him the best of anyone. And also the same thing for Despair to be like, we did not know our brother that well, none of us did, and it's up to the people that were closest to him that should speak. And Matthew's like, I said what I needed to say to Morpheus, but if you're going to speak, if there needs to be something said, Lucien can speak for the both of us. But either way, Despair talks about the fact is that I thought was really interesting, where she talks about how no one remembers the despair that existed before her, like 100,000 years ago. She's like, no one will remember, but I will. Because I think it's specifically something maybe with the endless. I guess the nature of someone, there has to be an endless to fill each function and role. And because of that, it has to be a situation of the previous has to be forgotten. It's just part of the ritual of what it means to fill the void of an endless. And I guess like Morpheus will be forgotten, and even Despair's like, all of you will. Just like the previous Despair won't be forgotten, I will remember our brother Morpheus. And I thought that was so beautiful. And Delirium going up being like, oh, I don't really have anything to say. She's looking at Destiny like, what should I say? And she begins talking about how scary he was initially, but then she was like, no, but actually, I don't think he was that scary. In fact, she's like, I think my brother was never big on questions. And she's like, I think I know why he wasn't big on questions, because he didn't know the answers. But she's like, in fact, I think he actually did know the answers, and he wished that he didn't. She was like, I spent so much time being scared of my brother, I didn't realize how scared he was. He was scared too. And it's like, we would have had so much to talk about if I'd known that. So it's like, and obviously how she's going to, it was a really beautiful thing. And then Death talking about Morpheus in the capacity of, once again, the whole thing of he was always dedicated to his function and his responsibilities, but she also talks about how he wanted something more than that, outside of that, whether he really conveyed that all the time or not, which he didn't. But it's like, our brother wanted kind of more than that. And obviously there's a conversation of how much he grew outside of his function, and how he did change. And I do think it's beautiful that obviously Destruction shows up, because of course he's not going to miss his brother's funeral and a chance to meet his new brother. But it's like, oh, you've never been here before? And Destruction's like, no, I've never been invited. And it's like, oh, do you want the rest of the siblings? No, he's like, probably best not to, black sheep of the family and all that. But I think for him, he wanted this day to be more about Morpheus, and then like if he comes back, it's like, it's going to be about me, and our siblings will try and convince me to leave. And he even said that line where it's like, do you miss him? And it's like, I already have, because the moment he left, he already missed his brother, he missed the rest of his siblings. And so it's not like the feeling of missing his brother ever goes away. It never will. It will always be there, but he has a conversation about, because I'm jumping around a lot, but I think it's so, once again, this Dream is trying to figure everything out. He plants the seeds and brings back Merv. He tries to bring back Gilbert, but Gilbert's like, no, I am dead. But he's like, no, like, you gave advice to Dream. Like, I just thought, like, I need you. But it's like, no, you don't. I was an idea created by your predecessor. You had to come up with ideas of your own, give birth to something else. He's like, basically, it is the thing of death matters. Because he's like, right, you're bringing all of us back. You could bring back Morpheus, right? He's like, can I? He's like, yes, but by doing so, his death was to protect the people he loved and cared about. It gave his life meaning. Like, life has meaning because it has an end. And if you bring Morpheus back, then you are just taking that away from him. His story's ending and its meaning. So don't do that, you know? That is just kind of like, you have to figure this out on your own, and that's okay. It can be scary. And he obviously says, I apologize for bringing you back. He's like, see, you're already different from the previous Morpheus. The other Morpheus would have never apologized to me. It's like, well, he did apologize previously, but, you know, it's like, you are early on in your career and you're already apologizing, whereas it took our Morpheus a very, very long time to get to the point he became somewhat comfortable with apologizing. But circling back to the structure really quickly, he had this interesting conversation with Dream about. He basically says, like, a conversation he had with Death, where it's like, we have all the answers. We're just, I forgot how he phrased it. It was almost kind of like, we're too scared to embrace that part. That the fact is that we do kind of have all the answers in us, because he tells him, like, the pendant isn't, you know, end all be all. It's like, your power is your power. That object exists just for the sole purpose of giving you something to focus on. It's just like Dream didn't need his tools anymore. It's kind of like a similar thing. So I wonder, will this Dream make his own tools? Because he has, like, once again, he has the jewel. Once again, it's an emerald rather than a ruby. I wonder, probably won't have, he might not have the mask like Dream did, or the sand. I'm so curious. I also think it's interesting, but it's like, well, Lucifer's probably not one for, I mean, Gwendolyn Christie might not have been available for the funeral. I feel like they would have probably went out of their way to show it, but also maybe funerals aren't her thing. But obviously, it's the whole conversation of, like, will I ever see? Because he's offering Dream an opportunity. He's like, oh, if you want to, you can abandon all this. It'll kind of keep going on without you. So, like, hey, we could go and kind of wander the stars together. But he's like, no, I think I'm where I need to be for right now. And so it's like, yeah, but will I ever see you again? He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure, like, you know, like, we'll probably, you know, the likelihood is we'll bump into each other at some point in time. So I thought that was beautiful. But like I brought up earlier, like, Lucian's is the one that kind of nearly broke me. Her, like, breaking down like that, you know, kind of having to say goodbye to him after everything, and she's the one that really reiterates it the most about how much he's changed and how much of an effect. Like, even saying, I think it was either her or Death that had that conversation about how even his ending will. I think it was Lucian that was like, even his death will change all of us as well. Like, it will have a lasting effect, that, like, he changed along on his journey, and we will all be changed by his death as well. You also had Lyda making her appearance at the funeral, which is like, everyone there just kind of turns and just kind of looks, and you're like, ugh, this is awkward. So she obviously sits by Rose, literally in the seat behind the Endless. It's kind of like, well, not too much of a kerfuffle, because they don't really blame her, because, yeah, this might have been born about because of her revenge, but at the end of the day, she was just an avatar by which, if it wasn't her, it would have been someone else. So they harbor no ill will. I mean, it's complicated. There's some complicated feelings there, but I think it's nothing to the point of, like, seeking some kind of wrath after her. And she actually does eventually meet with Daniel, and obviously it's kind of like a, yeah, I became this because you sought vengeance. She's like, I thought Dream killed you, and it's like, she wants her son back, but it's like, you can't. The moment you kill Dream, or set forth on the path to destroy Dream, you push me further away, so I no longer can be your son. And he kind of wants to talk about, like, getting vengeance. He's kind of, you know, that side of Dream can be very vengeful. And she's like, what did I do in the grand scheme of things? I lost my husband, I lost my son, like, and I lost my life. What did I do to deserve this? And he kind of pauses and he touches the necklace, and he's like, you did nothing. He's like, he's like, that's the, sad. And he even says, and Dream did nothing as well. He's like, it's just a sad reality of things that sometimes, I think he said that death can affect us in a way and strip us, like even when the choices we make, death can kind of basically throw us for a loop. That's just kind of a reality of life. That is like, at the end of the day, you didn't do anything, and for hereforth you will never be hurt. Go live your life. She's like, I just want my son back. And he's like, you have me. Anytime you dream, I will always be there because you're going to need me and I'm going to need you. And he's able to hug her. And I thought it was kind of nice rather than coming at this from a vengeful stand place, which the original Dream would have, but he learned forgiveness as well. Once again, you're starting off on a better foot because, it's even something Lucian says to him because he'll handle things in a very different way than his predecessor because he is different. He is the first human to become part of the Endless. And it's like that humanity is going to make you different from, though, it's going to make you special in a way that none of the Endless are. And I meant to bring this up earlier because of the whole despair conversation. How many of them have been replaced over the years? I guess I never thought about it. I just assumed, I was coming in as thinking like Dream's the first one of them to ever do that. There's no replacement for Destruction because even though he's not serving his purpose, it's still happening because he exists, and they don't need to be there to serve the function because by them existing in nature, it automatically is happening without them. They're just not the captain steering the ship. It's kind of an autopilot essentially. So, but with despair saying like, right, there was a despair before her, so does that put her and this Dream in a very unique position of, are they the only ones or have the others been replaced? Like, because I'm curious, does the comic ever cover them? I would assume maybe not, just because I think this version of the Endless, specifically this version of Dream, is what the story follows. So like I don't know if she's the only one amongst the Endless who had a predecessor, or have they all been the replacement for someone else at some point in time. I'm so curious. I thought that was an interesting like little lore nugget that I'm curious if the comic covered or not, but it might be off mentioned here and there in the comic, but it's probably not like a main part because like this version of the Endless, this version of Dream, the Morpheus that we knew, Morpheus was the crux of the main story. So you probably don't need to or really have a reason to explore any former versions, with Lucian saying initially that she was going to leave, my initial thought was like, oh, I'm not going to leave until I find you kind of a new librarian. I thought that was going to be the setup for Nola. I thought she was going to kind of fill that role. Because she can't go back to Fairy. Not necessarily that she can't, but she doesn't want to. And Clarikin is like, well, we understand that. I know that. And the Queen knows that as well, that you have no love lost for Fairy. Like, and she made it clear last episode too, like with or without Dream, the dreaming would be her home. And it's like, well, she kind of sadly, it's going to be without Dream. And obviously they were all talking about sticking together. Like if Lucian leaves, Matthew's going to go, and so will Nola, because they were going to stick around for the Morpheus and not this new Dream. But I love Merv being like, I like the guy. It's like, well, you're also a little biased. The guy brought you back to life, so you're going to be your opinion of him is going to be a little biased in that capacity. Obviously, the whole situation hit Hob really hard because the last time him and Dream met, he was like, come on, you're going to be fine. You always come to me being like, oh, this is the last time, but there's always another time. And it's like, well, now it was like the Dream he knew is gone, but he does still exist in the form of the Dream he's meeting now. It's interesting because it plays into the whole notion of nothing's ever completely gone, that, and energy can't be destroyed. It just manifests itself into another way, just like this Dream said, where he was like, the human was burned away, the immortal was transfigured. It's kind of interesting, like there's a little bit of that where it's just like he will always have a part of Morpheus with him, that will always be a part of his nature in conjunction with the humanity he adds from who he was as Daniel. But either way, Hob has first that conversation with Death, because she's like, yeah, like, do you want to come with me this time? And he's like, yes, I've lived for 650 years. I've seen it all. I've done it all and experienced it all. But then he's like, but I am here talking to Death at the funeral of the King of Dreams. And so he's like, yeah, I'm not dying anytime soon, or maybe not ever. And he's like, is that okay? And she's like, well, that's the deal you made with my brother. She's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, but I know that bet you made with him because, he told me. So I thought that was kind of beautiful, him choosing to still kind of live, because I think there's also this element of, yes, there is a lot of endings with the nature of going, but there is so much to life to never want to give it up. And there's stories and experiences still to be had. And I think there's also, it doesn't really say this, but and I think it kind of, well, it can coincide with Death saying that was the deal you made with my brother. It's like by keeping that going, by living, he's able to keep Dream alive, because it's like Dream made this possible for me. So I want to keep it going, because that way my every day that I'm living is kind of like a gift I was given by Morpheus, and it means even more so now that he's gone. But it's also like I get to keep a piece of him. And so he eventually goes and meets with the new Dream, and it's like, oh, you know me? It's like, yeah, like how much of you is my friend? It's like, yeah, you're the guy that inspired Shakespeare. He's like, no, it was Dream that did. And it's like, I've always wondered why he had him write a play, and we kind of look back on that. It's like the one appearance we get properly of Tom Sturridge one final time as a Dream, and he's talking to Shakespeare. Even it's like, okay, let's share this wine in my world. And it's like, why did you have me write this particular play, not one of tragedy and stuff like that? It's like, and it's the title episode. He's like, I wanted a tasteful. He was like, I want a tasteful. I don't know. It was like a tale of graceful ends. I think it's because that's the title of this episode. And he's like, because what was it? It was like one of them was like a magician who became a man who turned his back on magic. Like there being like this proper end, because Dream himself is like, because he believed himself to be not just a man on an island, but an island in itself that like, forever there unchanging. Because he's like, as long as I'm here, I can never like escape and leave. Because he even said in the last episode about how even the dreaming became its own sort of cage in its way. And it's like, but Shakespeare was like, every man is capable of dreaming, but he's like of changing. And Dream was like, I'm not a man. I do not change. And then just that poeticness of he kind of turns and he's looking to like that. There's like this ethereal element of just like Dream on the inside, the little bit of Morpheus still there, looking to his successor. And it's like, the funny thing is, you believe that so wholeheartedly, and you proved yourself wrong by changing. Also, like when they kind of gave him, the endless funeral of like sending his body off onto the water, and then it just, the boat disappearing and turning into like essentially almost like a comet and then to a star. There's something very beautiful about it. Like, you will always be there amongst the stars, especially because like the last conversation Morpheus had with destruction was underneath the stars, and they had that old conversation about it, so it feels very befitting. It's also interesting too, because like we know his mom as Night like wore a dress of the stars, so it's actually interesting too that neither one of them showed up. But it's like, well, they're not the greatest parents, so why should they show up at their child's funeral knowing what was going to happen to him? But maybe you can take some solace in knowing that there's some form of embrace with time and Night with their fallen son. I don't know. That's probably me being wishful thinking. It might be like they keep it moving just like they always have, so. It does seem like Lucienne is deciding to stay. Now, whether she will ever leave in the future, who knows? But she has been appointed from librarian to prime minister. So probably meaning, I don't know if she's going to work double duty as the librarian and the prime minister, or whether or not they'll find another person to fill that void, because that could also still be Nuala. Like, she still could take up that position. So I think the others are sticking around, at least for now, but the time has come for Dream to meet his siblings. and she leads him along the way and being like, oh, it's going to be, because I think Hob was like, oh, you're going to be fine. Like, I met your sister and she's pretty good, but it's like, nah, you're going to be fine. You're going to do good. And Lucien's like, oh yeah, like there's going to be probably some awkward pauses, but the awkward pauses are probably going to be the best bits. In fact, this version of you might enjoy them more than the other version of you. And so he goes into the room and meets his siblings, and they're kind of excited and elated to meet him, and just him smiling and sitting down and Lucien closing the door. It is beautiful, because this also goes back to something I forgot to talk about with death. She talked about, oh, right, that's what I was going to get at, and I completely forgot. And this is, once again, it's like the, I guess, magnum opus of the story, but also just like, this episode in general too, is that she's like, my brother was the king of stories, but the problem is, the sad thing is, he never had a story of his own. But now that he has an end, he does have his story. And so it's up to us. Not all of us will remember, but those of us do can carry on his stories and tell them. Tell the stories of his life, his experiences. And, that's how you keep someone alive in your memory, or those stories. He finally had a story, and you can only have that story once you've had that ending. And that's kind of what Dream has always kind of been looking for, just kind of, exhausted with like the weight of what he had to bear and carry. And now kind of there is an alleviation from that, and able to kind of live in peace, just kind of knowing like my story is done finally. So I think that's so poetic. And then the final bit of the episode is the kindly ones. There's some part of me that's almost like, oh man, I want some get back against them, but it's like, no, they're just doing their job. It is the nature of things. Once again, I still believe they kind of went about it the cruelest and most effed up way, but they were still just doing the duty that they were, in charge of. No different from Dream, no different from anyone else, And then finally, that fortune being what it is, was it like flowers that grow in the morning, they bloom in the afternoon, they wilt in the evening, and you can be me when I'm gone. It's just kind of like the stages of life in general, and they're just kind of like very dismissive of it. And I guess that doesn't mean as much to them, but it's just kind of like the motto of life. It's just the different stages of life: being a baby, an adult, an elderly person, and then being gone. It's just that you can be me when I'm gone. It's poetic to, this new Dream taking over after Morpheus is gone, but also just, I guess it's almost like that's just a cycle of life, that we're all capable of it, that even when you're gone, like there will always be someone that I obviously like potentially remember you by. And as long as you're, as long as we never forget those who are gone, they kind of are never truly, truly gone. So I think there's an element of that, of just, you could be me in the sense of you can live your life doing things, making your choices. Hell, I even skipped over the Corinthian and Joanna, even though she was kind of keeping her distance, and even that was the start of something else. Despite everything, once again, Joanna not wanting to get close to anyone because it's never worked out before, but ultimately she's like, you could come with me. She's like, I don't want you to be alone now that Morpheus is gone. And he's like, so she's like, well, how does this work? Am I gonna see you in my dreams? And he's like, you'll be meeting someone during the day. She's like, yeah, maybe. But he's like, do you have a problem with me being a nightmare? And she's like, everyone I've ever been with, every guy I've ever been with, every woman I've ever been with has been a nightmare. So kind of for her, what's different? It's like, yeah, take a swing. And it's just kind of almost, I don't know if it was his full intention, whether he knew that things would play out this way because it played out this way for her ancestor finding love and meeting her and knowing love. And I don't know if Dream necessarily planned that, because he gave Joanna her ancestor's journal because it's kind of like he kind of figured that's what she needed. But it's like, did he plan for things to play out the way they did, that she would kind of find someone and this story would play out this way? Kind of like his nightmare creation that broke his heart before now brought back a little different, finding kind of this person he had a connection to in the past who's kind of fallen the same path as her ancestor, all while it's kind of reborn as someone new. So it's all kind of like reciprocal in an interesting way. But like I said, it's unclear whether it's just destiny. I mean, sorry, not destiny, dream planned at from the beginning, or was just happenstance of, once again, the choices you make and the decisions you make, kind of paving the way, and it just happened to play out in this poetic sense. I don't know what the future holds in that regard, but I'm glad that we have that ending being what it is for them, because I was like hoping, like by the end I was like, oh, please let that continue being a thing. We might not get that story, and who knows what kind of shenanigan filled circumstances that'll turn into, but it's still kind of nice knowing that there's something that's coming of that. Like I said, I can only assume if, because Lucian's stick around, maybe the Corinthians gonna stick around, and so are the others, so it just kind of gives you thoughts about like what the future holds, with this new dream. But that's not the story we get to see. We saw this story and we saw its conclusion, and that's kind of what matters. It's that open-ended ending of, things continue on. But this story was told, and it's not like this story is any less important, even if things continue on, because this story happened and it mattered. Morpheus mattered, and just like anyone's story in that capacity. So I did look it up just for, once again, if in case this is your first time listening and hearing me talk about it. I've never read any of the comic, so this adaptation was my introduction to this story. So Googling it, and so it, like I said, this is Google, so take it with a grain of salt to anyone that's more familiar with the comics. But from what I was reading, it seems like for the most part this show has adapted pretty much all of the main story. There's some things that were not adapted or slightly moved around and changed. Cause I think there was something from there's some stuff from like volume 3 of the comic that was like adapted into this season in the form of flashbacks. Just when I saw, like, for example, this episode is part of volume 10, which is the final volume of the main story. Because there are like stories beyond this. There's like side stories as well as spin-offs. Like, once again, Lucifer, that the TV show Lucifer was like very loosely based off of. Those comics are side stories to this series about Lucifer going to Earth, and leaving behind hell, So in the grand scheme of things, I think for the most part, if not everything, at least most of it has gotten adapted. I'm curious if because like I said, it says part of the final volume was adapted for this final episode. So I'm curious, does that mean the rest of it's going to be adapted in the bonus episode? Or is this more like that's adapting a side story? I'm so curious to see. Obviously, like I brought up at the beginning, the bonus episode drops in a couple days. I also decide then and there whether I might feel like that's more like, because this is the ending that might serve as an epilogue, but like I said, it depends on where it takes place in the timeline, whether that's taking place after this ending or is it supposed to be at some point throughout this story. Because I know it's a death episode, but I don't know what the context of it is. So I don't know if I'll save those for now, the whole goodbyes for now, or whether I'll save that for the next episode. I don't know how I'll handle it, I might save them for the next episode and just kind of leave it off there. Like I said, I haven't really decided whether I'm going to label this the series finale, because it technically is. So, like I said, I'll label it the series finale for now. And if I feel like the next episode is more series finale than epilogue, but I mean, it can still serve as both, then I'll adjust the title of these recordings as such. But screw it, I'll go ahead and say it, and I'll probably reiterate it at the next episode as well. But this has been a hell of a ride. Like, I can't put into words like why I like this show so much and why I like this story so much, because this celestial, ethereal thing of just philosophical like conversations and just kind of the scale and universal like elements of this. It's so cool and intriguing. I like stuff like, I don't know if you call it heady. I think you probably could, but like a lot of the conceptual stuff in this is very heady stuff. But I enjoy the ride. Like I said, as someone who doesn't know the source material and only knowing this version of the story, I loved it. I'm sad that this is all we get. We are kind of getting most of it adapted. Obviously, not everything, but kind of be able to see this story to its conclusion. I'm happy with that. And I think it's a very beautiful and satisfying ending, barring whatever is in store for us with the bonus episode. But I love this ride, and to everyone involved in the series, front of the camera, behind the camera, from, cast, crew. I want to thank everyone for bringing this show and story to so many those who enjoyed the comics or those who are like me who've never read the comic. I just kind of want to give a big thanks to everyone in that regard. So, but yes, I've run my mouth off long enough. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.